it's pretty clear that the main theme in markets has been that the US dollar has been much stronger than most markets had forecast.
Hello and welcome to At the Forefront Fintech Conversations. I'm Sam Belden, VP and Head of Content at Forefront, and with me today is Steve Dooley, Head of Market Insights at Convera. Steve, welcome to At the Forefront.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, Convera is a leader in the B2B cross-border payment space. And in his work as head of market insights, Steve has authored Convera's Fintech 2025 report, which examines some key trends in fintech and their impact on global commerce, both today and in the future. So today, we'll talk about some of the key findings from that report, including how innovations like real-time payments and AI are impacting that landscape. So we'll get to that, but I'd like to start with an area that might be a little bit more familiar to some of our listeners, which is FX markets. I know there's a lot of uncertainty today at the macroeconomic level, high interest rates, high inflation, geopolitical concerns. Tell us a little bit about how these forces are impacting FX markets and any connection to global business overall.
Yeah, well, again, excited to be able to present the findings of the report. But looking at FX markets more generally, I think you're right when you say that uncertainties at record highs. If you look at some measures of uncertainty, we're at the highest level since the GFC. And I think the main reason for that does come down to geopolitics. We've had the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've had the growing ongoing tensions in the Middle East, and this year as well, over 40% of the world's population, more than 40% by GDP, is heading to elections. And we can see that right now with the UK election, the sudden snap election from the parliamentary elections in France, and the build up to the US presidential election. So geopolitics are certainly playing a much larger part in global FX markets than they have for some time. And really, you can always look back to sort of the UK's Brexit vote in early 2016 as sort of shifting a point where politics suddenly really started to matter to FX markets after a very long time of this consensus towards globalization and so I think that's certainly one point. But again, like you also say, high interest rates has been a big driver, and what we're seeing this year is a sudden shift. The last 2 or 3 years, or really since COVID, the global monetary policy cycle has been very, very coordinated. Everyone cut rates at the same time in 2020. Everyone started lifting rates together in 2022. But we can see now that we've started to see a bit of a shift in momentum. The European Central Bank, for example, cut rates in June. The Bank of Canada cut rates in June. On the other hand, the Federal Reserve seems to have been a little bit slower to start cutting rates than perhaps markets thought at the start of the year. The start of the year, markets thought the Federal Reserve was going to cut rates 6 times. At the moment, the Federal Reserve projections suggest they're only going to cut once. So what that has done in particular, the geopolitical tension has seen a move into safe havens like the US dollar, and the fact that the Fed's been slower to cut rates than maybe other central banks has also been supportive of the US dollar. So it's pretty clear that the main theme in markets has been that the US dollar has been much stronger than most markets had forecast, particularly in Asia. And we've seen that with the dollar yen moving up towards sort of 33-year highs. The Bank of Japan needing to intervene to push the dollar yen lower. We've seen the dollar versus the Chinese yuan, the dollar CNH, moving up towards multi-year highs, as well as the Chinese yuan weakened, and right throughout Asia in particular, the US dollar has been dominant. So they're the two big themes: geopolitical worries and a divergence in central bank moves, and it's basically all resulted in the same factor: a stronger US dollar.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, thank you for that overview. Interesting to hear about some of the sort of monetary policy moves that are happening, and you take the uncertainty with that, throw in some electoral uncertainty, and I could certainly see how that is the overall theme when you look at the climate today. So appreciate that overview. Shifting gears a little bit to what you guys focus on at Convera, I know that you are in the cross-border payments business, and I know that these payments are easier than ever from a consumer standpoint, maybe hasn't been quite as much advancement from a B2B standpoint, at least to date. And I know that that's one theme of your Fintech 2025 report. So tell us a bit more, give us an overview maybe of the space today and how you see the B2B landscape having progressed and how it will progress.
Yeah, there's two components to this, of course, and we think about how easy it is if we're out at a restaurant and we want to split the bill and make a transfer to a friend. It's relatively easy to make a consumer payment in the domestic space. Um, but if you change that to a B2B payment and then change that to a B2B payment that's cross-border, it just increases the level of difficulty because there's a number in the cross-border space. There are a number of different, typically sort of banking networks that you need to get to make a payment from one country to another country. B2B has lagged behind the consumer space because, of course, there are a lot more consumers. There's a lot more demand. So those two factors have meant that the experience that a customer has when they're, making a business payment cross-border compared to what they might experience, in the domestic context as a consumer is very different. And there's also a whole lot in cross-border, a whole lot of different regulations. There's anti-money laundering. There's sanctions lists. So it tends to be a lot more complex making a cross-border payment, and particularly a B2B cross-border payment. So that's certainly at the moment the experience you get as a business customer making a cross-border payment is very different to what you might receive as a consumer customer making a domestic payment. But that means that really what we see is over the next 5 years is there's a lot of opportunity now for improvement. And we can already see that the cross-border B2B payment landscape is changing and really changing rapidly. So we're really excited over the next 5 years as we see the kind of innovations around real-time payments and open banking really likely to be able to provide with business customers with a much better experience. And so that's what this report's about is, how do we get from where we are today to where we want to be in 2030?
Fantastic. You touched on some of the innovation that's happening in the B2B payment space today. Tell us a little bit more. What are the most consequential developments that are going to modernize that mode of payments?
Yeah, so first of all, it's the ability to really use technology to cut down some of that time that we take to make these cross-border payments. And there's a number of different ways that businesses that FX providers are looking at to try and drive that. In the first instance, we mentioned real-time payments, which is where the industry is working towards. And in the cross-border landscape, it might never be instantaneous real-time payments because, like I said, making a payment, you need to go through the anti-money laundering restrictions. You need to go through sanctions lists. So there are certain levels of scrutiny in a cross-border payment that will always be in place. So, but the idea of real-time payments is to get it as quick as possible. So, that's really what the industry is working towards. I mentioned how some of the steps that we need to take revolve around that compliance side of the equation, money laundering, anti-money laundering, sanctions lists, and so using technology to be able to cut down on that time for that compliance side of the transaction is really critical as well. And then in general, using technology to speed up some of the processes in the back end. That's certainly what much of what we've been doing at Convera over the last 2 years. We're in a transformation journey, and a lot of that transformation journey is just working on modernizing systems. Financial systems right around the world, tend to have been set up in the 1980s, and then have been really continuing to run on these fairly old platforms. And so, embarking on a kind of a wholesale reevaluation or reimagination of what those platforms might look like is another step in what the industry is looking to execute. So that's something that we've been focused on as well. So there are a whole lot of great ideas out there, like I said, in terms of digital currencies and real-time payments. But a lot of it is just getting into the depths of systems that have been in place, not just for individual companies, but for the whole payment network globally, and improving that. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of regulators trying to push forward with new standards to try and drive improvement. So it's really a journey the whole industry is taking. Some of it's glamorous digital real-time payments, and some of it's more traditional, just improving systems.
Fantastic. I know in my work with Forefront's clients, that holy grail very often is how can you give businesses, decision makers, those great experiences that they have with consumer technology while accounting for the operational complexity, the compliance realities, the existing technology investment that exists around the world. So it sounds like a very similar dynamic is playing out in the payment space, and good to hear that you guys are helping leading the charge there. Thinking about some of what you just walked me through, what's the state of the adoption of real-time payments today? Do you see any trends across geographies, types of firms, any common use cases come to mind?
Look, what's really interesting about real time and adoption of technology in general is that we're seeing a lot of the growth, through Asia, and the reason why is twofold, I'll say, but it's multifaceted. But first of all, younger populations tend to adopt new technology quicker than older populations, and also, like I was saying earlier about that. A lot of the systems in the West were established in the 1980s. Throughout Asia, a lot of systems were established more recently, and so those systems have been able to take advantage of newer technology, in particular throughout Asia and the developing world in general. Mobile technology has really taken off a lot quicker than some of the legacy systems that we use in the West. So, in terms of domestic real-time payments, the top five real-time payments are India, Brazil, China, Thailand, and Korea. So it tends to be younger developing nations than rather than we see the US, the UK, and Germany tend to be lagging quite behind because they've got an older population, but they've also already got systems in place that they use. And so if you've got a system in place that you already use, then there's less imperative to start using a new system. So that's the battle, I think, in terms of that real time payments. That through Asia, for example, you just use your mobile. In the UK, US, and Germany, for example, we've got systems in place already. So I think that's probably what the most interesting finding that we found in the report is that where we're seeing technology get adopted the quickest, you know, is in these younger countries. And as a result, as we sort of look at where the opportunity grows over the next 5 years or so, we actually see, for example, in the cross-border payments market, currently the dominant market is North America. By 2030, we see as APAC region as likely to generate more revenue for the B2B cross-border payments network than of payments landscape than North America. And again, that's because the population, the rapid economic growth, and the rapid uptake of technology provides more opportunity.
Interesting. Well, I'll definitely be keeping my eye on that trend and seeing if your prediction comes true. So appreciate that overview. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, in the context of cross-border payments, have you seen any compelling AI use cases, and do any future use cases come to mind that you think could make a major impact as generative AI continues to get momentum?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was at Money 2020 conference in Amsterdam earlier in June, and the focus on how AI can benefit the business, the cross-border payments landscape was front and center. And we talked about how part of what the industry needs to do is make these incremental steps. There's no big bang in terms of what's going to be a revolution in cross-border payments. It's going to be incremental, and AI provides a compelling case in terms of helping some of those incremental steps forwards. And what we're seeing most of all is in that risk management space. And I mentioned in compliance, either onboarding customers or the actual within the transaction itself, but areas such as know your customer or other identification and security issues can really be sped up by AI, and about being able to identify what's the kind of case that can just be swept straight through into a transaction, or what needs to be flagged for further review. So that's probably the main use case I think that we're seeing within the industry now, is in with that risk management space, in that compliance space, and being able to speed up onboarding and to speed up the actual transaction, the compliance component of that transaction itself. Other areas as well, to a lesser extent, customer service. That's probably more general than specific to the industry, and productivity using AI to find operational efficiencies. That's kind of broad, not just in cross-border finance, but right throughout, I think, the business world in general. But I think in terms of the payments space specifically, it's really going to be about saving time within that risk management space, in that compliance and fraud space.
Fantastic. Thanks for that overview. Regular listeners of this podcast will know that there are very few topics that we tackle today that do not contain some sort of AI tie-in. So interesting to hear how, when it comes to the cross-border payment space, it's also having an impact. So thank you for that. Any other key takeaways from the Fintech 2025 report that stuck out to you that you think might be worth highlighting for our listeners?
Um, Look, I think probably two of the things that I found most interesting is, the impact of open data and open banking in terms of, being able to share data to provide a better experience for customers is going to become, really critical over the next 5 years, particularly that embedded finance, where you provide a gateway to your services through a non-financial partner. So one of the biggest drivers of the growth in cross-border payments over the last 30 years has been employee mobility, but also student mobility. So the rise in international students. In Australia, for example, it's one of our top 10 export industries, and you would normally think that it's going to be iron ore and energy and agriculture, but it's surprising to see education on the list as well. So it's a really important part of cross-border space and a really important part of what of our business as well. So being able to provide a better solution, providing embedded finance solutions to educational facilities like universities, you can really improve the customer experience, can reduce some of these friction points, and provide a better result for the end user, the student, and the customer, the university as well. So open banking is part of a broader trend of open data and sharing data and providing a better experience. So I think that's probably where we see a big opportunity over the next 5 years as well. And also, I think probably the other point that I thought was particularly important, and one of the reasons why we did put together this report, is that the next sort of 5 years is really going to set what the industry looks like over the next 20 years. So I think it's really important for industry leaders and important for podcasts like this to frankly to be able to lead this discussion, to have the opportunity to talk about where we see the future of the industry, and particularly have that conversation with regulators. We've seen in particular with the European Union really taking the lead just as a default position, because they've got so many countries that are already operating within in any case, and they're pushing forward regulations around privacy, around trying to improve real-time payments, and then those regulations become the default standard globally. So it's important, I think, that the industry talks to regulators, engages in dialogue, and really talks about where we think the industry should be, what the best way of managing some of these discussion points that we have. So I think that's again one of the interesting takeaways, is that it's really important for industry players to take part, participate in these conversations, because we're really in a process now of setting what that B2B cross-border payment landscape looks like, and the decisions we make over the next 5 years will be in place for the next 20.
Fantastic. I know from working with Forefront's clients that, a consistent theme we hear from them is that effective industry dialogue leads to better regulation, leads to better business outcomes. So that makes all the sense in the world, and appreciate your explanation there. Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you again for your time today. We had a great discussion on the FX landscape, B2B payments, and how innovations like real-time solutions, AI, could have transformative potential across the board, whether today or in the future. So thank you again for coming on. If you'd like to learn more about what Steve and his company do, you can go to convera.com, or for more episodes of At the Forefront like this one, head over to forefrontcoms.com, mouse over to the news and insights section, and you could explore a full archive of At the Forefront episodes. So until next time, this has been At the Forefront. Steve, thank you again.